Ring of Honor heavyweight champion Chris Jericho and the Pure champion Daniel Garcia taking on former Ring of Honor champion Claudio Castagnoli and former Pure champion Willer Yuta. And this was good. I thought, honestly, of this tag match, this was probably the best showing since he's debuted for the company from Claudio.
100%. That's exactly my biggest takeaway of this was, wow, Claudio really got a lot of good shine here. We even kind of ran back the spot of him running around the ring, popping anything that moves, which was great. He's even kind of adding, and I don't know if somebody's training him up on this, but I don't know if you've noticed this, like before the spin, he kind of gets that, like he's almost hulking up, if you will, and kind of gets the crowd into it a little more. Like I agree. I think I've seen more out of Claudio than I expected from Claudio. We'll see. And there's even more later, which I'm sure we'll get to as we go chronologically, if I said that correctly, throughout the show.
Yeah, and obviously I think the big spot here was Daniel Garcia on his back, and then he does the big swing of Chris Jericho. So that was where we get the, oh, look at this. For people who don't know AEW or don't know Claudio, that's the thing that they'll probably remember as far as in-ring action. So we accomplished our goal. Yeah. Now, this is the thing I thought was interesting. Claudio and Yuta get the victory. But the fallout from this felt like this match was the fork in the road for the JAS and Blackpool Combat Club. Now, I know later in the show we get Garcia versus Sammy Guevara, or excuse me, Bryan Danielson versus Sammy Guevara. But I felt like post-match, if you listen to both factions, they didn't talk about each other. So after the match, Bryan Danielson is being interviewed in what I thought was a really cool spot. It wasn't the traditional check out the AEW background. It was almost like their gorilla position, which they named it after someone, and I apologize, I don't remember
what that's called.
Well, it was named after a more recent person who worked backstage who had passed away, unfortunately.
Oh yeah. There was like a somebody like a production assistant or something along those lines passed.
Yeah, and again, I apologize. I didn't write that in my notes, but I like the position that they did the interview because it felt more raw and real. So Bryan Danielson's being interviewed by Renee Paquette, who put on her walking shoes. She was everywhere during this episode. First time we see her is during this interview, and she asked Danielson, hey, what'd you think? Your team won. And he's like, I'm frustrated. I lost to Jericho. I'm frustrated that Yuta talked back to me. And as soon as he really kind of unfolds his anger to Renee, Yuta walks up because they just won the match and they just left the ring. He's like, I'm glad you're angry. Now we get it. Like, you jackass. And then Danielson's like, are you talking back to me? And Yuta's like, I kind of am, you bitch. And Claudio has to be the one that says, hey, stop it. The funniest thing I thought, though, was that Claudio mentions that it's Yuta's birthday.
Yeah.
And so the last thing Danielson says as he leaves is, happy birthday, Yuta.
Yeah.
It's like the most backhanded happy birthday ever.
I loved all of this, kind of what you said. It felt real because they were in this backstage setting, which you have done hundreds of events in arenas like this, and that is what backstage looks like, right?
1,000,000%.
Like,
yep.
We talk about locker rooms, but that's just, they're open cubicles anymore, or locker rooms, right? Like, they're just open little, dividers. And so, like, we don't get that a whole lot. Like, that's what it looks like, or it looks like you said, it looks like an empty hallway somewhere with a bunch of shit laying around because they don't have a storage room for it.
Exactly.
So I like that. Renee Paquette is 5 times better than anybody else that will do a backstage interview at believability. And you know what I mean? It just, I don't hate that.
Yeah, there is a sense of charm. And I don't even know if I'm using the right word there, but charm was what I think of. When Tony Schiavone does it, there's just that sense of like, good old Tony.
Oh, yeah. So maybe she's not 5 times better than Tony.
But Marvez.
But 5 times better than everybody else. Yeah.
And she is better than Tony Schiavone. That is no slight on Tony Schiavone.
But maybe not 5 times better.
Yeah, but Tony Schiavone just has that sense of like, oh, yay. Because one of the things that he's done that I really appreciate is he's developed little Tonyisms Where, for example, when it's with Britt Baker, he's always going to do the DMD because they're friends. So I like that that's part of his character, is like he's not neutral. But with Renee, she's awesome.
Yeah.
Like 1,000,000%.
And side note, before I get back to this Claudio thing, also with Tony, I love that he's visibly and outwardly frustrated with the people who are giving him shit, right? Like, as we'll talk about later, like, he'll be like, hey, fuck off, right? Like, this, I loved meeting Gene for that, where he'd be like, you get your goddamn hands off me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I will fucking sue you, right? Like, love it. Because that's, I mean, again, it's more realistic. Not everybody has to be like, oh my God, I'm so scared of this guy who's 5'8" and 195 pounds, right? Like, okay, let's move on with this. Now, Claudio, again, I think is the guy who shined in this. He looked like daddy coming in to stop the fight here. I like that Wheeler's getting, hey, he said he came here to learn violence. He came here to, get to that next level. Well, now maybe I'm not just here to be your student, right? Like, maybe I've learned enough, and maybe I learned that you suck. You can't pull your head out of your ass, and I need to save you.
It's very interesting because this is really a story, if told correctly, I think is going to be a story of the year for AEW. And the reason I say that is because if you look at Yuta's trajectory in Blackpool Combat Club, he didn't come in under Bryan Danielson. He came in getting his ass beat by Jon Moxley. Now, Danielson also beat him, but like the initiation took place from Jon Moxley. So now we don't know really his feelings, but it seems like, hey, I learned from the most violent of this group. I'm good to go. Bryan Danielson, you need to like get with it. And so now he's kind of bumping up to one of the founding members in a way that is different because it wasn't him that really initiated him. It was Moxley. And then you have Claudio, who is an elder, right? One of the elder statesmen of Blackpool Combat Club. And he really has no association with anyone except for, I like him, right? I like all these guys, but I'm not team Yuta over team Danielson. I'm team Blackpool Combat Club. So cut the shit. I like that. I think, and we'll see what happens here, I think what we're going to get is Danielson versus Yuta at the pay-per-view. Assuming we do that, that's the story that I'm most interested in, is because do we say, hey, old lion, the new lion is here to take over, step aside, or is it Danielson has his ego unchecked and, hey, fuck all you guys, I'm the best here, don't you assholes realize that? So I'm very interested to see the story, and this was the first step in that kind of bumping into each other aspect.
So it is interesting with the Blackpool Combat Club in that, I mean, they're instantly at a level of attention due to having Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson. You could argue in the top 3, if not, 5 of the people they have on that roster, right? Of notoriety, of wrestling, right? So you normally don't get that with factions. So you could lose one of them for sure, but I also feel like both of them they don't really need this Blackpool Combat Club. It's nice to build a story around when you don't have another idea. But Jon Moxley, I mean, being the world champ, if you're not using the Blackpool Combat Club to your advantage, then it almost is kind of like he's there, right? Like, right. So I just kind of, to me, work that. Get Bryan Danielson away, maybe. Then Moxley's the head guy-ish, but it's Regal. And then maybe Moxley just whatever's like, hey, guys, look, I gotta, I gotta go. It's time for my vacation. This has been fun. Yeah. Right. And he's gone. And then you got William Regal, and maybe Claudio's the leader, and then we get a couple others underneath, right? It's a 3-man group with Wheeler and somebody else, or a whomever, right? I'm not asking for that right now, but that I think would still be one of the best factions you have in AEW. So I think there's a million ways you can go with this.
Yeah, and on top of that, going back to the interaction that we saw on screen, one person that we did not mention was William Regal. Now, he was in picture, he was there, but he didn't really step up. He kind of was just like, hey, I'm going to let these guys fight it out, see what happens. And maybe that's his role. I'm interested to see where he comes, right? Because he's been the one that's supposed to be mentoring the elders, right? The founding members, the Moxleys and the Danielsons. So what does that mean for him with Yuta?
There was even a subtle moment there where Claudio's like, hey, knock it off, right? And he was like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go kick his ass. Like, we're going to sit down. We're going to talk this out. And he kind of gives them both the look, and he even kind of looks over at Regal, and Regal's like, fuck, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he's like, all right, right? Like, fucking, I mean, that could be the thing. Regal could be like, hey, I saw it. Like, he's primed to, maybe that's it. You could take the whole heel faction. Danielson leaves, whatever, like, he does this thing, right? He's out because he's like, fuck Wheeler Yuta, right? And Bryan Danielson becomes a heel against the Blackpool Combat Club. But later, like, you can turn the Blackpool Combat Club as, like, heel by Regal being like, it's time, Claudio. You got to be ruthless. And he takes out Moxley, right? Let's say Moxley loses the AEW championship to somebody, and that's when Regal's like, I knew he didn't have it. It's time. Could take him out. And then Claudio takes him out. Then you get this Moxley-Claudio feud for a while. Like, there's, again,
could be fun.
A whole bunch of ways you could go with this because it is so multifaceted. Great stuff.
Could be fun.